All right, Anthony, welcome to the Jay Dyer podcast. How you doing?
I'm so happy to be here. As you know, religion is such a great topic that deserves just an incredible amount of autistic discussion. So thank you so much, Mr. Dyer, for letting me on the show.
For context, of course, I was on TradTards, your show, a while back,
Yep.
and we were kind of joking about it before we went live. You spent the entire first conservatively 5 minutes referring to me by name repeatedly as Jay Dyer.
Completely
And
seriously, too. Just a complete, utter fuck up on my end.
yeah, look, it happens. And I've told this story before, but I don't think Jay Dyer particularly likes me. I don't think about him much at all, but apparently I did something to irritate him. Many such cases, as they say.
Yeah, there was something weird going on there because I've never watched him. I've never watched him. It's a name that's been thrown around in circles I run in, and when I sat down to do that episode with you, it just was stuck in my head. And what's crazy is you can go and watch the episode, on my channel, and I edited out like that whole part. Like every time I just kept referring to you falsely, and then for some reason, like as I was watching and I'm editing, I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, I completely screwed this up. I'm like, how am I going to save this episode? And then like 7 minutes into the recording, I just start referring to you as Burden again.
No, again, it's when you're a highly professional podcaster with a massive team behind you, you don't make these errors. Pay no attention to recent episodes which featured thumbnails made in MS Paint, of course. See, well, obviously, I'm familiar with your work. I had a great time on your show, but people may not be. If you could just briefly describe who you are and what you talk about on the internet.
Sure. Yeah. So, TradTards, as the name implies, there is a traditional element to it. We're a traditional Catholic YouTube channel, but at the same time, we are self-referentially styled as Tards. I guess my whole idea behind having the show was I think there was already an oversaturation of like the Catholic influencer space of like a very catechetical and like very like serious. And I get it. It's good to have an educated and informative aspect of Catholicism online, and I think that goes for any denomination or religion, right? But my whole thing was like, look, if I'm listening to a podcast on YouTube, I kind of want it should be like a chill thing. I want to listen to it. They should be people that are somewhat normal. This is not the entire thing they think about. They have lives, they do things. And so I kind of wanted to make TradTards as kind of a little bit more of a self-aware commentary on the traditional Catholic space, because at the end of the day, we are a very odd bunch, especially from outsiders looking in. And I think there's a lot of comedy there. There's a lot of humor, and it's a lot of fun because of that. And I met some really great people in the space. There's some really weird people in the space. It's one really weird dysfunctional family, but I saw an opportunity and I decided to take it. And I had this picture of the late Pope flying around, and I was like, this is a perfect image for a channel. So I took it.
Yeah, actually, and obviously we need to address the elephant in the room here. Pope Francis.
Oh yeah, he did.
Yes, he did. And to me, there's a couple interesting things about that. One, there's been kind of the uproar over funeral decorum, right?
Yeah.
So you may not be a purveyor of shall we say leftist slop as I am. I think it's kind of fun. But the kind of blue and on crowd was absolutely irate because Donald Trump wore a blue suit to the funeral, which it turns out was explicitly an option in the written invite. But of course, right, you saw dozens, right, just thousands of words spilt over this scandal. But of course, that's kind of the minor, daily grind politics stuff. It doesn't matter, right? Everyone forgets it in a few days. But there are a couple of things which came from it that were interesting. Of course, you have, Trump and Zelensky and that kind of iconic photo. But obviously, the biggest question is what comes next. I've been reliably informed that the Catholic Church doesn't tend to make decisions quickly. And so obviously we'll probably be waiting for a while, but is there anything you want to speak to there about what comes next?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. first off, the whole Trump suit thing. Yeah, that was really funny. I do think just the image alone of Trump being like the sole blue suit, and, like in the sea of just black suits, is very comedic. Like just politics aside, I just did think that was like a funny contrast. But yeah, I don't. You know how it is. It's just pearl clutching, right? Like, oh my goodness, like he somehow defamed like the Pope's funeral by daring to wear blue, right? I don't know. We should have sent Fetterman instead, so he could have gone in there in shorts and a t-shirt. That's
Or
my
we should
idea.
send White House reporter Tim Pool in his beanie.
Oh yeah,
You
exactly.
have Melania in her prayer shawl and Tim Pool in his beanie.
Well, they might have turned him away. They might have thought it was a yarmulke, and they would have been like, "What are you doing? Like, you're obviously lost, Rabbi." All right, I'll leave it at that. But yeah, in terms of decorum, it was
for the sake of the YouTube censors. I don't think that's funny.
No, that was horrible. I'm sorry. Tongue was possessed there for a moment. But mea culpa for the Jay Dyer reference incident, and also for the Tim Pool funny hat incident. But yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I mean, I think most people, if they have any sort of Catholic content in their feed, have probably been bombarded by like people pretty much trying to play like normal party politics with the Cardinals. People kind of forget, right? Then I guess I'll try to keep this, where you can chime in here whenever you feel like it, because it's a very interesting and unique system, right? How the conclave works with the College of Cardinals. It is a elective monarchy. And when you think about it, I mean, a pope is elected by their peers, right? It's all other cardinals that have voting status. Some cardinals that are non-voting that are eligible for election, although it's unlikely. And because of that, it leads to unexpected results. So, people can go in with, maybe a good idea of who might be a front runner in the beginning, but the conclave election is also it's complicated by the fact that it's a 2/3 majority. And anyone that knows anything about just elective government, getting a 2/3 majority means a lot of times compromise can happen to prevent just total gridlock, right? And they don't want to keep the church without a pope for too long. The Cardinals have business they have to attend to back in their respective dioceses as bishops for many of them. So it's very interesting to see a transition of power in a elective monarchical system that is, also inherently not just a temporal ruler, but a spiritual one as well. I mean, I think anyone, just even, being non-Catholic or not, or Catholic, I should say, it's interesting. It's extremely interesting. I mean, if you want, we can kind of get into maybe some of the more open discourse about who might be out of the Cardinals, might be the most eligible, or what seems to be like a front runner right now. If you want to get into that, we can do that.
Sure. So again, my thoroughly uneducated perspective on it, I was very much amused that there is a cardinal in the running by the last name Pizza Ballo.
No, Pizza Balla.
Oh, excuse me.
It's even better. Pizza Balla.
Which, is just kind of comedic on its face. I think the other kind of open question is, what will the legacy of Francis be? Because there seem to be a number of kind of open questions affecting Catholicism, again, from the outside looking in. So obviously you have the trad question,
Yep.
which has been, to put it mildly, controversial. But also, to take things back to kind of gross domestic politics, one of the things that really defined the kind of like 2019 through 2023 segment, before we all got really upset about Trump and immigration, was the ability of so-called, I don't know if I should say that, the ability of nominally Catholic leftist politicians to promote certain policies. Right there, I can't remember the name of it. I think he's the Bishop of San Francisco. Got into a massive argument with Nancy Pelosi about this, back and forth. Of course, as far as I understand it, Cardinal Ratzinger wrote a piece about Catholics and abortion, where he basically said, Catholic politicians cannot approve or promote abortion and still receive communion. Bishop of San Francisco basically said, "Hey, look, you know, adrenochrome chugging lizard person, Nancy Pelosi, I am going to threaten." I don't think he actually did, bar you from communion. So that's another kind of open sore that, may or may not be resolved. But it seems to me that there are these kind of burning cultural issues that the next pope will have to deal with. So before we go into, the succession, so to speak,
Sure.
what do you make of those kind of issues that the next pope will likely have to contend with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good to kind of focus on the micro, because the macro, Pope Francis's legacy, I mean, that's going to be an open debate for the next, I mean, probably the rest of our lifetimes, frankly. His pontificate as a whole was extremely controversial. He did some good things, right? This is a trad saying it. He did do some good things. He did some crazy bad things too. And there was a lot of things he didn't address. And so, yeah, in terms of, nominally Catholic, right, politicians being able to, be, openly affiliating as Catholic, active in the church, also, receiving communion, while promoting things that are abjectly against church teaching, right? Here's the thing, like, obviously Benedict can, write an encyclical. He can, the church can put out, notices, saying like, hey, look, things haven't changed. Despite what the Pope does in that regard, it's always been like, if you are in the public eye and you are a Catholic, then there are, especially if you're a temporal ruler or a politician that has any sort of responsibility and power, like you have, you can't serve two masters, right? You either are a Catholic or you're not. And part of that is believing that abortion is something that is objectively murder. You're killing a child. So with the, Pelosi question and, bishops and also individual priests in some cases, refusing communion to these very public individuals who have public stances, right? It's not like, a bishop has the ability to look at someone coming up to receive communion and even tell if they're Catholic or not, right? But, if you're Nancy Pelosi, which most people on the street would be able to recognize, and it's also very well known that you're a Catholic, well, you're in scandal. There's also just the argument that you're in probably mortal sin by virtue of being in an office where you actually have ability to, your decisions have weight at that point. And because they're public, you are held to that standard. So in regards to how Francis reacted to that, it's unfortunate that it seems that we need to have such a correction from the highest level. I think it kind of gets also into too how people view the Pope, because like when you really go down to it, bishops have much more authority within a diocese than the Pope does. And I mean, it only makes sense, right? The Pope is he is the head bishop for the entire Roman Catholic Church, which is a global institution with, over 1 billion people under his patrimony. It would be impossible for him to be involved in the day-to-day affairs and runnings of every diocese and archdiocese across the planet. So what the bishop that you referenced, the Bishop of San Francisco, Coeur d'Leon, he did, exactly the right thing. He came out and said, hey, look, at least he wasn't going to be the one to, he wouldn't confer communion upon Pelosi if she came, to, I guess, the cathedral there. I've actually been to it in San Francisco. It's a very nice cathedral. But, he took that stance, and that's something that is actually within the realm of his responsibility, and he was well within his right to do that. So, yeah, Francis not coming out stronger against that, it really should be up to the individual bishops, and I think that's, something that definitely the Pope can influence. He can put a little more pressure on the bishop saying, hey, this is a major topic. It's causing grave scandal that we have very public politicians holding policies that are counter to their supposed beliefs as professed Catholics, and you need to put a stop to that. So, yeah, there is some onus on him. It's a sad day that, we need to have bishops, kind of get a kick in the ass to do their job. At the very least, Bishop Corleone did that. And Francis dropped the ball in a lot of other places too. As a trad, the liturgy wars are a constant thing. That's another can of worms. I won't open that unless you want to, because we only have a bit of time on here. But in regards to domestic policy, there was that, right, with Catholic politicians, being able to receive communion. Obviously, that extended at one point to our former supposed president, Joseph Biden, right? Obviously, the greatest Catholic in America. Uh, and also too, in regards to our domestic policies, the constant like kind of back and forth little persnickety comments that would, kind of come out of these airplane interviews about immigration and other things that were obviously kind of like just subtextual, just remarks against Trump pretty much. Right. And that's really where the friction was causing a lot of strife, especially on the right, because it's like, you have a Catholic, the Catholic Church is a mainstream Christian denomination. And of course, there is a humanitarian aspect if there is a huge amount of people just coming into a country with the no control. There's no trying to stop any abuses that might be occurring there. I mean, whenever you have tons of misplaced people and any form of migrant entering a country under illegal auspices, there's going to be problems. And, controlling that is something that is well within church teaching. So that I would say that's a bigger problem, even more so than the trying to corral every, horribly catechized boomer Catholic that now is, that went to like Notre Dame or some other Jesuit run school in the 60s that now is in like the highest, annals of office in America. I'd say that the constant like undercutting of, the idea of a nation having sovereignty, which a nation having sovereignty is something that completely jives with Catholic teaching and has always been fine. That was a lot more problematic, I'd say.
Yeah, there's something to that. You mentioned the BQ, right? The boomer question, and maybe rephrase that. We'll figure it out. But point is, this is something I talked about in a recent discussion with Stormy Waters. That that generation, while there are obviously good ones, some of my best friends are boomers, so I can say it, is what I'm trying to get at. But you really have the children of the post-war consensus. And again, while I am not Catholic, I have many friends who are. And one of the things that I've heard them speak about is the interesting demographic turnover taking place within the priesthood, right? Where a lot of the most virulent left-wing priests tend to be older. They tend to be baby boomers. And if you look specifically at younger priests, they tend to skew more traditional. And something that affects religious communities of all stripes, right, not just the Catholics, is generally speaking, when left-wing Christians have children, their children are no longer Christians, right? You can look at the kind of legacy American Protestant denominations, and you will see a room full of old people and no one else. And so I'm curious, assuming that those assumptions about demographics are true, what do you think that the next few decades hold for us? 2026, I believe we will hit the 50% mark on boomers, right? We'll be halfway done with them. And obviously that mortality increases at kind of a parabolic rate. But where do you see the next few decades for the Catholic Church?
Yeah, for the Catholic Church, it's going to get really interesting. So, just like you said, right, there is a huge generational split and a turnover, and this turnover with the boomer generation, eventually, maybe it's not the most decorous way to say it, but dying off, right, in the next few decades, there's going to be some pretty drastic consequences. So, obviously, there's a lot of reports that have come out, new priests coming out of seminary are by and large conservative, if not explicitly traditional. Traditional orders, whether they be the ones that are in full communion with Rome, under I guess some of the more learned or informed about all the cat nonsense on here would know, like under the Ecclesia Dei Commission, like the Society of St. Peter or Institute Christ the King Sovereign Priests, the ones that have their own seminaries, they've seen just a sevenfold increase in vocations. Granted, they're small communities, but they're constantly expanding. They have to continuously expand to meet the demand of young men that want to enter the priesthood in traditional communities. And the few, but somewhat growing number of, younger priests in the seminaries, that are coming in through now, are by and large all conservative, to varying degrees. And this also ties back into what was, just the ginormous shift that occurred at a very formative time for the boomers which was, the wrapping up of the Second Vatican Council while most of them are probably being born. And then, the introduction of the new mass probably within recent memory for most of the ones that are a little older, right? They probably were around, at the very least in their early kind of moving into adolescence, if not like, early teenage years when the new mass comes to be a thing. And obviously there's a huge amount of change there. And we're seeing this everywhere, right? Just like you mentioned, leftists don't beget children. And long term, that doesn't spell very good for them, while people that are more conservative or traditionalist are obviously not opposed to having children, and many, having lots of children. So it is a matter of time. What we'll see in the next few decades is either going to be something drastic happening from the top, where they're going to try to delegitimize, traditional communities, because pretty much they know the writing is on the wall. So the only options that, kind of this reigning liberal hierarchy that was like really, really steeped in the, the new theology that really propped up and was catalyzed by the council that has held, the reins of power for so long and is finally on the way out. They're either going to change the goalposts of what it really means to be Catholic, try to do something drastic that is, outside of the bounds of the magisterium or church teaching, and cause like, some interreligious crisis within the church itself. Or they're going to try to change things regarding ordination to try to hold on to, their power within the clergy. This is kind of why the whole topic of female ordinations has kind of been a thing, because they know it's like, well, it's only a matter of time until, we start getting the only priests that we have are the only people that want to go to seminary are conservative, right? Like, why would, if you're a liberal Catholic, there's absolutely no reason why you'd want to go to seminary unless you're, maybe homosexual, right? So they're not really going to grow there, and they know that all the potential priests going into seminary are going to be at the very least conservative, if not outright traditional. So what they're going to try to do, and we've already seen this, is try to either lessen the importance of the Catholic priesthood, or you try to like rise up lay members to kind of take more of the roles that were assigned to the priest. You see this a lot in communities like in Germany, where they have lay people, because they just have such a shortage of priests. They have like lay women, like assuming almost all the responsibilities of a priest in certain parishes. And I mean, the German church is obviously a whole mess, but you have that. You also have two, they're constantly kind of bringing up the topic again of, getting rid of the discipline of priestly celibacy, as if that would be some, magical way to fix the vocations crisis. I know it might be crazy, but actually it isn't. You can look at the Orthodox Church. They have, priests can be married. They still have problems getting enough people to go into the clergy. It's not it's not a remedy for that either, but they're trying so hard to move those goalposts, because just like you said, it is a matter of time. The cultural shift is something that is obviously affecting our, domestic demographics, and it has huge implications for the church, because the fruits of the council and how the faith is practiced since 1970, since the end of the council in like 64, it is really tied up with the boomer generation, which became this giant cohort. I mean, there is a reason why, there's that refrain where you hear someone say, well, I went to Catholic school. That's almost all, before they say something that's completely off the deep end, something that's completely against just any idea of Christian thought. That is by and large the boomer generation that has this idea like, oh, well, might come from an old stock Catholic family, put through Catholic school. Their formative years were really happening during this huge new springtime of the church. In the mid to late 60s and then early 70s with the advent of the new mass. So their perception of Catholicism is one that is so completely warped, and that has been kind of in the front seat for so long. That seat's about empty, and so it's now kind of this fight or flight. They're either going to leave, and the church is going to go a little bit back. It's going to take a long time, I'd say, to really correct. The church is going to go back to a little more traditional. I think liturgy is going to play a big part in that, just from what we've seen in the past 5 years. Or there's going to be a changing of the rule book last minute, so they can try to hold on, a way to try to change the faith to the extent where, even this complete sea change in the seminaries won't be enough. So that's where I think it's going to be. I think the next 20 years, it's going to be this fight or flight. And it remains to be seen. And a big part of that response, I think, is really going to rest on who this next pontiff is.
Sorry, accidentally unmuted, and then remuted myself. To that point, again, I am thoroughly out of my depth at the point where we are speculating as to the identity of the next pope, right? I don't know any of the players. But one of the things that I have the utmost faith in, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, is the absolute desperation of basically just communists, right? To throw any institution into chaos as a cynical way to hold on to power. And, especially when, you are a diminishing minority, right? You no longer have new members in to swell your ranks. I mean, I think the likelihood of that is, likely quite high. Those rumors were even swirling around, when Francis was selected. There were rumors that Jesuits had basically threatened to split the church if they didn't get their way. Now, obviously, those are rumors. I have literally no idea what I'm talking about. But, the fact that even in the most charitable reading that there is that feeling of widespread paranoia, I think speaks to something very real.
Oh yeah, definitely. And don't apologize for talking about rumors. If there's one thing that's like super Catholic, it's like papal, like intrigue, schizo posting. Like that's been going on forever. So I mean, it's it's an old tradition. Yeah, I mean, papal intrigue is incredible. And yeah, I mean, the election of Francis was unique. Obviously, you had a pope step down for the first time in like 700 years. So I think there was a lot of scrutiny there that was well deserved. But yeah, just like you said, there was a Marxist bent to a lot of what was going on in the church at the time. When the long march to the institutions happened, the church, I think I go so far to say, was not an exception, unfortunately, to that march. And when the council happened, when it did, it was at a horrible time. Right. Early to mid 60s. You really could not have picked a worse time to be like, let's reevaluate our traditions and how we present ourselves to the world. I don't want it to become like trad Catholic man yells at clouds, sort of thing about Vatican II. But it does go back to that extreme. And yeah, with the Jesuits, unfortunately, especially in the past, half century, really becoming this extremely progressive force. Yeah, it definitely, I think there was a well-deserved scrutiny of Francis coming in, and how we're going to see this conclave play out, in literally just a week from now. How much influence there's going to be from that. I mean, this old guard is still there, but like I said, they see the writing on the wall. So how they're going to react is going to be very interesting. It's hard for me to make a lot of predictions. When it comes to the conclave, we have a little bit more of a better understanding because obviously we all know who the players are in the College of Cardinals as it stands. Did you want to kind of get more into that as we moved on here?
Yeah, I'd like to. That'd be helpful.
Sure. First thing I say to anyone, Catholic or non-Catholic, that wants to know a little bit more about the rules of the game and how the ground is right now, there's a great website. Everyone should check it out, collegeofcardinalsreport.com. And it's in a really, really, really good breakdown because, these Cardinals are all bishops and, some priests that have been elevated to the position by former popes where they have the ability to vote and be present at a conclave, right? These are pretty much like a cardinal isn't like a position like a bishop, right? That has specific responsibilities outside of a voting status at a conclave. You've been chosen by a former pope. So what it shows is the breakdown of where they're from, their position, right? A little bit about their backgrounds. So you can probably get a better understanding of kind of where they fall when it comes to, if you want to call it church politics. I kind of shudder at the description, but it is a pretty apt one. Kind of where they fall in terms of being more liberal or more conservative in regards to how they, exercise the faith. So you can go through there. There's generally about 22 that are considered papabile or papabile. That these are the ones that are more likely than others based on a number of factors to be considered actual candidates in a conclave. So, like I mentioned, right, you have to have a 2/3 majority when they do this election. So that makes it very difficult for anyone that's too extreme, that's stepped on too many toes to ever really get elected, right? This is something that happened in '06 after John Paul II died. Francis actually was in the running first up. He was the first one that was like in the first vote that came back because they do multiple votes. They have to do multiple votes until they finally get that 2/3 majority. And that's where the real intrigue happens because like you see who's like runner, like, front runner first almost never gets it because then they have to kind of just trying to find that candidate that like is just agreeable to the most number of cardinals. So you get these weird results. So '06, obviously, Jose Maria Bergoglio, his, non-papal name, is not elected. And instead it's Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, and he has a very interesting papal history, but that was a little bit of a surprise, right? And he, outside of at least in regards to all the popes after the council, he was the most conservative of them. So when it comes to looking at these papabile, there's always been some ones that the media has kind of found and have kind of clung to because of how interesting they are. So as you mentioned, good old Pizza Bala, right? Um, besides just having a great name, he is out of the Holy Land, right? This is something that makes him very, very unique. Obviously, within the past year, there's been a lot more media attention on what's going on in the Middle East, in the geographical area that was always known as Palestine, right? So there's been a lot more interest about him because he's literally in Jerusalem, that diocese there, and he's, his area of authority, includes all of the holy sites that have Catholic churches on them, including it, like if not all, the major Christian sites in the Holy Land, and that also includes the churches in Gaza. So he would be very interesting, right? He definitely doesn't have a lot of public views on some of the hot button like interchurch issues, right? But on that basis alone, he's kind of gotten a lot of media attention and maybe more so than he deserves. I think he definitely has experience working with like controversy, so he might be good as pope for that. But as I mentioned before, you really seem to find in conclaves that moderates or people that are just seen as like safe picks are the ones that are chosen. So people like Cardinal Sarah, I don't know, have you like what is the extent of what you've seen? Like I guess
I have seen memes about trying to get the Catholic Church to elect Nick Fuentes or Mel Gibson or me as the Pope, which, while amusing, are not particularly serious analysis. So the answer is I have literally no idea.
Gotcha. I'm always curious. I mean, because there's been, like, goodness gracious, running a Catholic meme account, which is a kind of a part of my show, right? To see the amount of like just retarded autism you see on Instagram about it has been insane. I put a meme up where I was just joking, like, send this to your Protestant friends, and it was like you elect, we actually elect the Pope by cell phone vote, like American Idol. It's a reality show called not America's, but the world's next top pope. So yeah, you just gotta get your voting in. You gotta dial that number and send in your vote before the conclave, and you can get the pope you want. But yeah, like I said, it's difficult, right? And yeah, technically any male Catholic could be the pope. So if the bishops opened up all the ballots, or I think they have a secretary that they pick to actually read the votes. If they were to open it up and it said Jay Burden, all of them, and it was like unanimous, they would have to like track you down and then put you through. I don't know if they put you through seminary, but you have to get ordained very quickly to the office of bishop, and then you'd
So
be
what you're
installed.
saying, there's a tremendous potential for like a late '90s madcap comedy about like someone's stoner son mistakenly getting elected pope. We
Yeah,
get Pauly Shore in it. It's a great idea.
I'm surprised no one's actually ran with that idea. It'd be a great comedy, right? Like just some random dude gets elected And then
It's the plot to
success.
Sister Act 3. They have Whoopi Goldberg be the Pope.
You shouldn't say that. You're probably like manifesting that into reality right now, man. That's a little scary. Well, speaking of, obviously, there's been a lot of discourse about there being potentially, for the first time, a black pope. Yeah. So as I mentioned, Cardinal Sarah, the most traditional.
Wait. You can't say that. Many of the popes have been Italian.
Oh yes, that's right. Most of them actually. So I guess one that's yeah. No, what am I saying? Yeah, you're correct. You're correct.
It's a long tradition.
We've yet to have an Irish pope.
Oh, well, I mean, the church does still exist.
Yeah. Oh, that would be
Jay Burton's 23andMe. The results.
The Hibernian menace has yet to infiltrate Rome.
I don't even know it, but I'm afraid of the results, so I won't spit in the tube so Mormons can know my DNA.
To be self-referential to our last time we collaborated, there's not been a Quebecois pope.
Well, I mean, that's good. So the point is, there are a lot of distasteful nationalities where you could select from Pope. Isn't there a Malaysian in the offing, or is he? Oh, is it another country in the area? Is he Filipino? I can't remember.
There is a Filipino. Yeah, there's one that's from Myanmar that's also considered Papabile. And remember, Papabile is just like, this is from so-called experts and people that are really, I mean, apparently in Rome and in Italy, just like papal news and papal intrigue is just like, it's almost its own like media industry. And I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, this is a global institution, right? Granted, if you're Catholic, you think it was founded by Christ himself, which is probably the only reason why I continue to believe that the church hasn't completely fallen into complete abject disrepair after a couple millennia. But yeah, there's like a whole media industry about just like what goes on and like rumors and stuff and papal insiders, right? I mean, it's even more exclusive than just being like a no-name staffer on Capitol Hill. I mean, like to work in the Vatican, like a certain number of Italian citizens are in there, and then a certain number of foreign correspondents are allowed in. And then if you're like tenured or if you have real reason to be there all the time, there's a small number of like actual citizenry of the the Vatican state, as outlined originally by good old Mussolini back in the Lateran Treaty. So there's so much there. Yeah, Tagle, the Filipino cardinal, right, that you mentioned, he's obviously gotten a lot of airplay too. He's considered very likely. He's kind of seen as a potential successor to Francis. Thing about Tagle, other than being Filipino, though, he's been given responsibility in the church before, like in an administrative role, and he didn't do too well. He was put in charge of some charity agencies, and he was removed a few years later. And it was kind of like they didn't like to talk about it too much, sort of thing. Hey, we elected somebody who was very obviously a fellow traveler with Francis, and he couldn't even run like a charity agency. So I think because of that, and because he's seen as like an ideological front runner for the more liberal of the cardinals, I think there's actually less chance than most people are giving him that he is the next pope.
Just due to sheer incompetence.
Yeah, I mean, seriously though, I mean, like this is, I can only imagine for any of the good cardinals that are in there, and I don't know, can't begin to imagine. I know really the interior workings of their mind or heart, but I feel like even if I were the most like, progressive guy in the room, right? If I were just some like, horrible Lavender Mafia, like, springtime of the new church cardinal that loves to listen to shitty guitar music at mass, I probably would want the guy that's like leading the charge to finally fix the errors of Catholicism after so many years, right? I'd want them to be competent, because if there was one thing Francis was, even if he was not a friend to tradition, he definitely was able to push stuff through that he really wanted to see happen, right? Things that he saw as important, problems that he saw that needed being taken care of. He had a very almost autocratic tendency. And believe it or not, as maybe some of the non-Catholic listeners might be surprised to hear, the Pope, as much as he does have an incredible amount of authority. It is a position that only recently has kind of seen a lot more increases in executive power, right? as I mentioned before, he is the head bishop. He still is a bishop. He is the bishop of the Diocese of Rome, and he obviously has some very important powers regarding defining doctrine in the rare instances that needs to happen. But there's a lot of what he does is really supervision and refinement. And also he has to ordain, new bishops and, also elevate cardinals. And there's just some very specific papal responsibilities he needs to take care of. But a lot of the autocratic tendencies you saw under Francis, I mean, like, it was like kind of wild to see occur. And so are we going to see another, we could potentially get someone who might even, feel like Francis a lot on the same issues and, have a lot of the same views, but is he going to be as cutthroat as Francis really kind of was? I mean, there's a lot that was said behind closed doors about Francis, so like some of these internal, leaks and stuff people from insiders would say he was kind of a very old school, no nonsense sort of leader. And this is a guy who came from Argentina. There's a lot of comparisons to Peronism in his governance as the pontiff. He would do a lot of like, in Peronism, a big tactic was kind of like throwing a bone to the other side just to kind of keep the heat off of you, right? So he would do one thing that would, kind of piss off the other, like the more conservative traditional sides. Then he kind of do another thing the next, pretty soon after to kind of level that playing field again. But he's still kind of pushing through, his aims and his agenda. To be able to find another pope that would be as, as strong-willed as Francis was on the left, I think is a little bit unlikely, because I've yet to see through the number of cardinals that are currently considered Papabile one that is like Francis in that regard.
Well, that's helpful. I mean, like you said earlier, the likelihood of any one of these front runners getting selected is relatively speaking low. So to kind of pivot back to just like gross domestic politics, what do you make of the increased? Oh no! How does my audio sound now?
Oh, it sounds way better.
I was just recording the first half of this through my laptop speakers.
It's fine, man. I mean, I could hear everything you're saying, but now you're like in 4K,
like a $400 microphone.
Now it's like, oh, I'm like, oh, now my ears are being massaged by your soothing voice.
Oh, that's so stupid. Why did I do that? Well, if you stuck around this long, you're welcome. I fixed it.
So this is the real viewers special HD definition side of the show that only the real Beaver Gang gets to listen to.
The irony is, by the way, I was making fun of Anthony before we started for recording his laptop mic when he had a real one. So this is just the ultimate poetic justice. Wow. Anyway, we're not just here to talk about my inability to use a piece of software that I've used for now almost 300 episodes. But point is, right, what do you make of the increased presence of Catholicism in the American conservative scene? Obviously, you have someone like J.D. Vance, who was visiting with the Pope shortly before his passing. I would, you know what? Here's the thing. If he did, that'd be pretty cool. Like, not morally cool. Obviously you shouldn't kill the Pope. That's a firm stance we have here at the Jay Burden podcast.
Man from Ohio kills the Pope. I mean,
but as like a supervillain origin story, that's pretty cool. You got to admit that.
That would be. No, you're completely. No, this is a great question because I mean, I posted it actually on the Instagram page. Yeah, I mean, there's an incredible amount of Catholics in this new Congress. There's an incredible amount of Catholics in this administration, right? Trump too. A lot. If there was a lot of a certain religion in Mr. Biden's cabinet.
Which religion? What religion are you referring to?
In the words of the Second Vatican Council, they were termed as our elder brothers in the faith.
So the Black Hebrew Israelites?
Obviously. Actually, Nation of Islam. But yeah, a lot of proponents of the Yakub theory in in the government of Joseph R. Biden.
Yakubian occupied government.
Yeah, this is for all the listeners that have been listening since the beginning. The people who I said Tim Pool was affiliated with, that
this
group.
is also just proving that I have two jokes, because I think we made the exact same joke during our last conversation.
I believe it. Well, we also made a lot of jokes about the size of Obama's wife's shoulders.
That's totally not the point of this podcast, but all I'm going to say, that lady could have played D3 football and nobody would have known the difference.
I need to know the back split routine. Mrs. Obama, please send it to tradtards@gmail.com. I need it.
Just Michelle.
Michelle,
like lateral raises in rows with like the podium in front of the
Michelle
White House.
Obama, please save my back routine. Michelle Obama, if you can hear me. Okay. So yeah. A lot of Catholics, right, in Trump 2.0. And also, you've probably noticed this too. Anyone that follows Trump's socials, whether it be his, his Telegram channel, which I think is crazy, he has one now, or Truth Social or anything, he has like really thrown Catholics a bone on the social media side. Like he's constantly posting things on like major Catholic feast days that are explicitly Catholic. Obviously, I think Melania has a lot to do with it, because he was doing stuff like to a lesser extent in his first administration, like very like pro like Catholic things, going to March. I mean, not March for Life isn't inherently Catholic, but they, most people there are. I mean, pretty much every Catholic high school is there at March for Life. And, he was the first sitting president to like fully attend it in person, which was a big deal. And I was there for that. Very cool. And also he's just been, like I said, posting a lot more about Catholic, very explicitly Catholic things on the main, as the children say. And also Vance, right? Vance, being there right before. And, I make a lot of memes about Vance, having a non-Christian wife, but, he came to the faith later, so who am I to judge there? I mean, he probably doesn't like the situation either.
He actually made a post about this, or a statement. I don't think it was a post, but apparently he did obviously convert after he married his lovely wife. And what's interesting is that he raised his kids in the church. And recently, I think his eldest has gone through whatever Catholics call confirmation. I don't know. Point is, his kids seem to be raised Catholic, and that is a priority for him, which, obviously he can't divorce his wife. That would be bad.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Paul talks about it, like, because I mean, this was a problem in the early church a lot. Really funny. JD Vance is bringing early church problems back to the forefront. But yeah, people becoming
in a multitude
Christian.
Of ways. You mean by murdering the Pope as well?
That too, right?
He's taking us back to to an earlier era.
Actually, Vance is part of a esoteric cult that traces its roots back to the esoteric religious practices of the native indigenous of Ohio. It involves copious amounts of White Monster being drunk in the moonlight and sharing of JD Vance memes in secret.
Do you know that if you go into the bathroom at night and yell "Skibbity" 3 times, JD Vance will appear behind you?
Oh no, it happened to me last week, dude. Fucking sucks. Yeah, it was a horrible time. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Yeah, no.
Do not ask what he did to his couch on the way out.
Horrible. Yeah, it was. Vance is an interesting fellow. I mean, when it comes to the Catholicism influence with him, him raising his kids Catholic, that's a really good thing. But with Vance, with him being a little younger, he's not like an explicit traditionalist, right? Like he's never, at least from my knowledge, because it would be news to me if he came out and was like, yeah, Latin Mass is really cool. Haven't heard him say that, right? And the Catholics that are in the cabinet, they're kind of like more like Gen X, some boomers as well. But these are still Catholics that had to grow up under and with the boomer hierarchy that we still have. And so obviously, on some Catholic social teaching, right, that's definitely seen a bit of an increase in coverage. the overturning of Roe v. Wade, if we're looking at the judiciary and the number of Catholics that are, on the Supreme Court, that definitely played a role, right? How much like explicit like Catholicness is going to like result from there being so many Catholics in the Congress? Again, there's plenty of Catholics that are Democrat, within the legislative, houses, and the cabinet members too, they're Catholic, but like Melania, right? Not a cabinet member, but this is, arguably the closest Catholic to the seat of the throne in the United States, right? Literally the wife of the president. Even she is not immune to having very, kind of cafeteria Catholic. That's the term that's usually used to describe one that picks and chooses the things they like about, the faith. And even in her book, she writes like she thinks like, abortion is something that is like permissible if like the woman, like it causes her great distress, right? And like not like distress like in a medical sense, but just like she pretty much said like she believes in a woman's right to choose, right? And this is the Catholic that is closest to the seat of power, if there was anyone there besides Vance himself, right? And it remains to be seen. I mean, I think I think that there's been a lot more rapprochement because of this political like genesis of like kind of like the regular conservative Catholic is starting to become like a normalized thing, right? Like we're past like kind of like any weird like annoying like discourse that might have happened in like the 90s where you had like what was very like a Protestant evangelical side to like the conservative movement. I think we're starting to see a little bit more balance in the character there. And I think that's just because like we are, and we definitely were, but we still are in such pretty bad straits that it's kind of causing like there's a lot more dialogue between Catholics and Protestants in the United States. That's something I've seen in my own life, and I think that's something that we're seeing a lot more now on the political side. Like where there used to be a bit more of a distinction there, and now we're starting to see like, hey, we're both Christian, and there's problems here that we can definitely work along the same lines of common ideas about virtue that we share, and at the end of the day, a common history. So that's my answer for that. I know that was a little long-winded, and we talked a lot about Melania and Vance, who obviously, are the greatest Catholics in America.
Yeah, well, see, if I had to give my Mount Rushmore of Catholics, it would obviously be Dasha Nekrasova. I think that's how you say her name. I think I'm gonna go with some guy I know. He's pretty cool. Then probably I think I'm gonna go back to Mel Gibson. It's a solid one. Not for his movies, just for his political views.
Does Australia get him though?
Yeah, I mean, okay. By this logic, it's just like this is my personal right. Like the four Catholics I like the most, and then I think I'm gonna have to go with J.D. Vance for killing the Pope, just out of for sheer audacity, right? You have to respect you have to respect the I guess the daring, like he who dares wins, and
yeah.
J.D.
Well,
Vance.
I mean, but the problem is like if you kill a bishop, like it's an excommunicable offense. So he's technically, if he did kill the Pope, he's not Catholic anymore.
Well, we'll have to search for number 4. But anyway, man, we are fast coming up on time.
Yeah.
If people want to find more of your work, what's a good way for them to do that?
Yeah, definitely. So at TradTards here on the YouTube, right? You can find me. I also have a Telegram. It's also, believe it or not, at TradTards. And I have an Instagram at TradTards. So you can find me at all three. Got some ideas in the works, thinking about potentially having some merch. Something that did happen in my personal life. I got married very recently. So
you're out of the running for the Pope is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's out for the count. So no trad Pope Anthony Schneider. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show, man. And
dude, it was a fun time.
Always a pleasure, seriously. And thank you I'm a very small niche little YouTube channel with accompanying socials, and it means a lot just to be on here. Thank you.
Well, yeah, dude, it was a ton of fun. As far as my stuff, the Jay Burden Show is available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. I'm going to link my appearance on TradTards. It's a ton of fun. I don't remember anything I said, but the people who watched it seem to take a lot from it. So check that out. we talk almost exclusively about Michelle Obama's V-taper.
Yeah.
If you want to support the show, you can do so with the links down in the description. Check out our sponsor, Axios Remote Fitness and Coaching, or North Appalachian Supply for all your gear needs. I should clarify, because there were some people reacting to a photo purportedly of me, and they were saying that obviously if this photo, which was a photo of a post-op trans fan, is really you, then what is Axios worth? And I hate to break it to you, that was not me. You can just lie on the internet. You can say whatever you want. So don't believe everything you read, especially from me. Anyway, man, I appreciate it. And everyone at home, keep your head up. Life can't last forever. Good night.
Thank you so much.